In this video, I will show you how to find the slope, the length, and the midpoint between 2 points. So when I talk about length, sometimes you'll hear me say distance. The distance between 2 points and the length of a segment is the same thing. So first, let's talk about slope. The slope is rise over run if I had a graph. But if I don't have a graph, then I really want to think of the slope using this little formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So looking at a and b here, y minus y would be 1 minus negative 6. Do you hear the minus negative though? 1 minus negative 6. When you subtract a negative, you add, so it'll be 1 plus 6. And then in the denominator, it will be negative 2 minus 4. So that is going to give us 7 over negative 6. All right, also known as negative 7/6. So that is the slope. All right, next we need to find the length of this segment. So there's a couple ways to look at it. There is a distance formula. So AB will equal the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. This is the distance formula, and that will give me the length of the segment. The distance between these 2 points is the length of this particular segment. So this is a common way to do the problem. I feel like I need to zoom in and change my ink size a little bit. Let me zoom in and use a finer point. Okay, so I am finding the distance between A and B, or the length of segment AB, whichever way you want to say it. So I'm going to do my x minus x. So that's going to be, so I've got negative 2 minus 4 squared. And then here's that y minus y again. So just like before, I'm going to wind up doing 1 plus 6, because 1 minus negative 6 is the same thing as 1 plus 6. Okay? And now I can do this sort of step by step by hand. But what I can also do is I can put this whole thing in my calculator. So I'm going to do it both ways, because I just need to show you that anyone who has trouble with doing the calculations by hand, the calculator is there for you. So I can do the square root of, all right, negative 2 minus 4 squared. So I can have negative 2 minus 4 squared, and then plus 1 plus 6 squared. All right, so that is radical 85. Okay, so just keep that in your mind that we got the square root of 85. But if I were doing this by hand, it would look like this. So negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6. So this would be negative 6 squared plus 7 squared. So that's going to be positive 36. All right, negative times a negative is a positive, so positive 36 plus 49. And sure enough, that's going to give me radical 85, because 36 plus 49 is 85. So either way, so that is the length of AB. Now they did say round to 1 decimal place if necessary. So if I wanted a decimal form, I will just toggle this. Okay, let me go back to where I had the square root of 85. All right, square root of 85. And I will hit this double arrow key. So that's 9.2 if I round to one decimal place. All right, or if I wanted the exact answer, it would just be radical 85. Okay, now we're going to find the midpoint. So the midpoint is just the average of the x's and the average of the y's. All right, the x value of the midpoint is the average of the x's. All right, the y value of the midpoint is the average of the y's. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so that tells me that the x value of the midpoint is going to be 4 plus negative 2 divided by 2, because I'm just doing the average of the x's. And that's going to give me 2 divided by 2, which is 1. Now, the y value of the midpoint will be the average of the y's, so that will be negative 6 plus 1 divided by 2. So that'll be negative 5 divided by 2, which is negative 2.5. That means that the midpoint is going to be 1 comma negative 2.5. All right, so that is how you find the midpoint of a segment. Okay, going back to the length for a moment. All right, I found the length using the distance formula, but there was another way that I could have found the length that I wanted to mention before I move on. And that is, I could have basically done the Pythagorean theorem. So this is not going to be an accurate graph, so don't worry about it. All that matters is the horizontal change and the vertical change. So look at the x values, 4 and negative 2. All right, on a number line, how far apart are these guys? All right, can you visualize it? So like here's negative 2 and here is positive 4. All right, and somewhere in the middle is like 0. Now, this will be a good method for you if you can glance at this and see that the distance between these is 6. So that is the change in the x values is 6. So I'm just going to put that right here. Now, how about the y values? Okay, the y values are the negative 6 and the 1. How far apart are they? All right, if you can see that these are 7 apart, then this method is a good one for you. So I could just quickly do the Pythagorean theorem to find the hypotenuse, and that's going to be the length of the segment. So the length of the segment will just be the square root of 7 squared plus 6 squared, which is exactly what we were getting over here, right? Which would be 49 plus 36, square root of 85. So that's another way to find the length, is just to make a little sketch and find the change in the x's, like how far apart are the x's, how far apart are the y's, and do the Pythagorean theorem. So now you have a choice. All right, moving on. Problem number 16. All right, slope, length, midpoint. Okay, I guess we're just practicing. So let's go back and, all right, so slope. again, we're doing y minus y over x minus x. So 4 plus 2. All right, it was really 4 minus negative 2, but it becomes 4 plus 2. Now x minus x, so that's 0 minus 8. So that's going to be 6 over negative 8, which reduces down to negative 3 over 4. So here is the slope. Okay, now let's find the length. Okay, I think I will do, let me show you that second method that I was showing you off to the side a minute ago. Let's do the Pythagorean Theorem method first. I'll do it both ways. So here's my little sketch. Okay, and what I'm really looking for is the hypotenuse here. So, look at the x values. We have 8 and 0. How far apart are they? They are 8 apart. Now, look at the y values. Okay, I've got the negative 2 and the 4. How far apart are they? They are 6 apart. All right, left 2, right 4, that's a total of 6. So, that means that the length of CD should be the square root of 6 squared plus 8 squared. All right, so that's going to be 36 plus 64. Interesting. All right, so that's going to be 100. So that means that CD is actually just 10. Okay, so look, if you're comfortable, if you can look at negative 2 and positive 4 and go, oh, those are 6 apart, then this is a good method for you. All right, if you look at negative 2 and positive 4 and you can't come up with a distance of 6, then you should probably stick to the distance formula. So let me switch over to the distance formula now. So the distance formula would be like this. So, for a second I forgot that it's not A and B anymore, it's CD. So the distance formula method, we do x minus x. So 0 minus 8 squared, and then y minus y. So that's going to be 4 plus 2, because the whole minus and negative is a positive thing, squared. And so this is how you do it using the formula. All right, I could put this in my calculator right now if I wanted to. Okay, maybe I'll do it just to make a point. So what did I have? 0 minus 8. Four plus 2. All right, obviously, whoops, you should be able to do this without a calculator. $10. Okay, so using the formula, you could just go straight from here and then bam, you have 10. Or you could go, okay, this will be negative 8 squared and 6 squared. So that's going to be 64 plus 36. Okay, you can see it's really the same thing that we got when we were doing the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, moving on. Now, finding the midpoint. The midpoint is going to be the average of the x's and the average of the y's. All right, so let's start with the x values. 8 and 0. So that's going to be 8 plus 0 divided by 2, which is 8 over 2, which is 4. And then the y values, that's negative 2 and 4. So I've got negative 2 plus 4 divided by 2. So that's going to be 2 divided by 2, which is 1. So the midpoint will be 4, comma 1. Okay. All right, I think this is the last problem for this video. So for these problems, we can use this graph. Okay, all right, so for the slope. So the slope is like rise over run, you know? So as I go from one point to another, I could go vertically and horizontally. That's rise and run. So vertically, I see that this is 4. So this is a 4. Horizontally, this is 6. All right, so when I do my slope in a second, all right, rise over run, I'm thinking 4 over 6. However, this is going downhill from left to right. So that makes this negative 4 over 6. Or some people like to go, well, I went down and right, so that makes this a negative 4 and a positive 6. Either way, you get negative 4 over 6, but we should reduce this, so this will reduce to negative 2 over 3. So that's the slope. Now, to find the length, this is perfect for doing the Pythagorean Theorem method instead of doing the distance formula. I would definitely recommend the Pythagorean Theorem. So segment EF, the length of segment EF should just be the square root of 4 squared plus 6 squared. All right, it's just we're doing the Pythagorean Theorem. So EF should equal, so that's going to be 16 plus 36. So that's going to be 52. They said 1 decimal place if necessary. So let's see. So I'm going to do the square root of, and I could have done 4 squared plus 6 squared if I had wanted to. Okay, so that's another thing that you might see is 2 radical 13. That's the same thing as 52. So if I hit this, I'm coming up with 7.2. So EF is approximately 7.2. Okay. Now, let's find the midpoint. All right, the midpoint is going to be the average of the x's and the average of the y's. So I would like to have the coordinates of each of these points. So the first point, point E, is negative 3, comma 3. And then point F is positive 3, comma negative 1. So the x value will be the average of the x's, right? So that's going to be negative 3 plus 3 divided by 2. Interesting. So that's going to be 0 over 2, which is 0. Now the y coordinate of the midpoint will be the average of the y's. So that's going to be 3 plus negative 1 divided by 2. So that's going to be 2 divided by 2, which is 1. That means the midpoint should be 0, comma 1. All right, which is just what it appears to be.